The Velthri Empire had conquered 17 species across 3 galactic arms over the past 2,000 years. They were a proud race, tall and scaled, with eyes that glowed amber in the darkness of space. They measured civilizations by their willingness to kneel, and those who refused to kneel were simply erased from existence. Admiral Kethrin stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the blue dot of Neptune grow larger on his view screen. His intelligence officers had assured him that the human outpost orbiting this frozen world was poorly defended. 2 small patrol ships, a few hundred security personnel, nothing that could challenge even a fraction of his 40 warships. Sentinel Station was home to 8,000 humans, scientists, engineers, miners, and their families. Children attended school in the station's central hub while their parents extracted rare minerals from Neptune's moons. It was a quiet place, far from Earth. It's built by people who wanted nothing more than to work and live in peace. Danny Castillo was 15 years old. He had lived on Sentinel Station his entire life, born in the medical bay to parents who had emigrated from Arizona. On the morning of the attack, he was eating breakfast with his mother when the first alarm sounded. "What is that?" his mother asked, looking up from her coffee. Danny checked his personal tablet. The station's alert system was showing something he had never seen before: multiple unidentified vessels approaching at attack speed. "Mom, I think we need to get to the shelters." They never made it. The Velthri did not bother with demands or warnings. They simply opened fire. The station's thin shields collapsed in seconds, and plasma beams tore through the habitat rings, like fire through paper. Danny found himself alone in a corridor filled with smoke. His mother had been beside him one moment and gone the next, pulled away by an explosion that ripped open the wall. He stumbled through the chaos, his lungs burning, until he found an emergency communication terminal. Something his father had taught him before he died 3 years ago came back to him if something bad ever happens. "Danny, you record everything? You tell people what you saw. That's how the truth survives." Danny activated the terminal's camera and began to speak. His voice was steady, though tears ran down his face. "My name is Danny Castillo. I'm on Sentinel Station. We're under attack. There are at least 40 alien ships. They look like nothing I've ever seen. They're killing everyone." He paused to cough, the smoke growing thicker. "I can see their markings. I'm sending images now. Please, someone help us. Please tell Earth what happened here." He transmitted everything his tablet had recorded: ship configurations, weapon signatures, trajectory data. The information would prove invaluable in the months to come. 11 minutes after the attack began, Sentinel Station was silent. 8,000 people, including Danny Castillo, were dead. On Earth, Commander Lisa Monroe was working the night shift at the Global Defense Operations Center in Geneva. She was 42 years old, a veteran of the Mars Rebellion, and she had spent the last decade behind a desk hoping she would never see real combat again. The distress signal arrived at 0347 hours. Lisa watched the footage from Danny's transmission 3 times before she trusted herself to speak. "Get me Admiral Warren," she said to her aide. "Right now." "Ma'am, the Admiral is retired. She's in Maine. It's almost 11 at night there. I don't care if she's on the moon. Get her on a secure channel. And start waking up every shipyard commander on the planet." Oh, the young aide stared at her. "Commander, what's happening?" Lisa pointed at the screen where Danny Castillo's final words were still frozen. "War. That's what's happening. And we need to respond before they hit another colony." Within the hour, the President of the United States, the Premier of China, the Prime Minister of India, and the leaders of 30 other nations were on a conference call. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Howard Price, had been pulled from a state dinner in Paris. "Ladies and gentlemen," Howard said, his face pale, "what I am about to tell you is not a drill or a simulation. At approximately 0330 Greenwich Mean Time, an alien fleet attacked and destroyed the human colony at Sentinel Station. There are no survivors." Reactions ranged from disbelief to horror to rage. Howard let them process the information before continuing. "We have identified the attackers as the Velthri Empire, a species we have had limited contact with over the past 20 years. They have never shown hostility before. We do not know why they attacked, and frankly, at this moment, I do not care. The Prime Minister of Japan spoke first. What are our options for response? That, Howard said, is why Admiral Catherine Warren is joining this call. Catherine Warren was 70 years old. She had commanded the human fleet during the Mars Rebellion, the last major military conflict humanity had faced. She had retired 15 years ago to a small house on the coast of Maine, where she spent her days fishing and reading history books. She had always known this day would come. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine said, her voice calm and clear despite the hour. For the past 50 years, Earth has maintained a publicly visible defense force of approximately 200 vessels. This force was designed to appear adequate for colonial protection. While being deliberately insufficient for major military operations, she paused. This was intentional. Confusion on the faces of world leaders was evident. Catherine continued. In 2089, humanity made first contact with a hostile species called the Kreth. They attempted to raid our outer colonies before we drove them off. After that incident, the United Nations Security Council approved a classified program known as the Hidden Fleet Protocol. Under this program, humanity has been secretly constructing and storing warships in hidden facilities throughout the solar system. How many ships are we talking about? The American president asked. Catherine smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. 12,417 combat-ready vessels, including 800 dreadnoughts. We have been preparing for this war for half a century. The Velthri just did not know it. The silence that followed was absolute. The Velthri believe they attacked a defenseless species, Catherine said. They believe Earth cannot fight back. In approximately 72 hours, I intend to correct that misunderstanding in the most direct way possible. Howard Price addressed the United Nations that evening. Billions of people across human space watched his speech. The Velthri Empire has declared war on humanity through action, he said. They believe we cannot respond. They believe we are weak because we chose peace. They measured our visible strength and decided we were prey. He leaned forward, his eyes hard. They were wrong. Earth remembers every war it has ever fought. From the fields of ancient Mesopotamia, to the trenches of Europe, to the dust of Mars, we are not a species that forgets. We are not a species that surrenders. He straightened his jacket. To the Velthri Empire, I have only this to say. You should not have touched our children. You should not have made us remember what we are capable of. And you should have studied our history more carefully before you decided to make us your enemy. Beneath the surface of Mars, Luna and a dozen asteroids scattered throughout the solar system. Massive hangar doors began to open for the first time since their construction. Ships that had waited in darkness for decades powered up their engines. Crews that had trained in secret for years boarded their vessels. Humanity was going to war, Captain. Samuel Drake had spent 19 years commanding a cargo hauler called the Morning Star. It was honest work, moving supplies between Earth and the outer colonies, and it had given him time to watch his daughter grow up through video calls and occasional shore leave. He was 53 years old now, gray at the temples, and his knees ached when the weather changed. He had made peace with the idea that his days of adventure were behind him. 3 days after Sentinel Station, someone knocked on the door of his apartment in Seattle. Samuel opened it to find a woman in a naval uniform standing in the hallway. She was perhaps 40, with short dark hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too much. "Captain Samuel Drake?" she asked. "That depends on who's asking." "I'm Commander Patricia Vance, Terran Defense Intelligence." She held up an identification card. "May I come in?" Samuel let her in, offered her coffee, and waited. Patricia sat on his worn couch and studied him for a moment before speaking. "You served on the battleship Oregon during the Mars Rebellion," she said. "You were the executive officer. You earned 2 commendations for valor and 1 reprimand for disobeying a direct order to save a damaged transport." "Ship? That was classified?" "Not anymore." Patricia pulled a tablet from her bag and handed it to him. "Captain Drake, you've been reactivated under Emergency Protocol 7. Your new command is waiting for you." Samuel looked at the tablet. The specifications displayed made his breath catch in his throat. The ship was called the Arlington. It was a Sovereign-class dreadnought 2 kilometers long, armed with weapon systems he had only heard rumors about. According to the file, it had been built 31 years ago and stored in a hollowed-out asteroid near Jupiter. "This is real?" he asked. "Very real. The Arlington has a crew of 4,000. Most of them have been in cryosleep rotation, maintaining the ship in shifts. They're waking up now, and they need a captain." "I'm a cargo hauler. I haven't commanded a warship in almost 20 years. Trisha leaned forward. "Captain, I've read your file. All of it, including the parts that were supposed to be destroyed. You're exactly what we need. Someone who knows how to fight, who knows how to lead, and who won't freeze when the shooting starts." Samuel stared at the tablet for a long moment. His daughter Megan was a teacher in Portland now. She had her own life, her own apartment, her own friends. She did not need her old father around anymore, but the image of Danny Castillo's final transmission played in his memory. A 15-year-old boy, alone and terrified, documenting his own death so that others would know the truth. "When do I leave?" Samuel asked. Patricia smiled. "There's a shuttle waiting at Boeing Field. Your bag is already packed." Across human space, similar conversations were happening. Retired officers received visits from intelligence agents. Veterans who had signed confidentiality agreements decades ago were reminded of their obligations. Engineers who had built ships in secret facilities were called back to service. Admiral Catherine. Warren arrived at the Mars assembly point aboard a military shuttle. She had not worn a uniform in 15 years, but it still fit. She stood at the observation window of the command ship, Constitution, and watched the fleet come together. Ships emerged from hidden bases like ghosts rising from graves. Dreadnoughts, their hulls black and angular, designed for maximum firepower and minimum visibility. Cruisers, sleek and fast, built for flanking maneuvers and rapid strikes. Carriers, each one housing hundreds of fighter craft. Destroyers, corvettes, frigates, support vessels. An armada that had existed only in the most classified files was now assembling in the darkness between Mars and Jupiter. Lieutenant Marcus Bell approached with a tablet. He was young, perhaps 30, with the eager energy of someone who had never seen real combat. "Final count, Admiral," he said. 12,417 vessels, 800 dreadnoughts, 2,000 heavy cruisers, 4,000 carriers with full fighter complements. The rest are support and escort ships. Catherine nodded slowly. "In the crew situation? We're at 92% readiness. Most of the cryopreserved personnel have been revived and cleared for duty. We're pulling veterans out of retirement to fill the remaining gaps." He hesitated. "Ma'am, some of these people haven't served in decades. Are you sure they're ready?" "They're ready," Catherine said. "They've been ready their whole lives. They just didn't know it." She turned back to the window. A dreadnought was gliding past, its running lights creating a constellation of red and white against the stars. The ship was called the Defiance, and according to her records, it had been built in an underground facility on Titan 40 years ago. "The Velthri have approximately 3,000 ships in this sector," Catherine said. "Their intelligence suggests we have 200. They think they outnumber us 15 to 1. They're about to have a very bad day, ma'am." "No, Lieutenant. They're about to have the worst day in their empire's history." On the Arlington, Captain Samuel Drake walked the corridors of his new command. The ship was enormous, a city of metal and technology that hummed with barely contained power. Crew members saluted as he passed, their faces a mix of youth and experience. Some had been in cryosleep for years, waiting for this moment. Others had been pulled from civilian life just days ago. His executive officer was a woman named Rachel Torres, a former combat pilot who had spent the last decade teaching flight school on the moon. She fell into step beside him as he toured the weapons deck. "Impressive, isn't it?" she said, gesturing at the rows of plasma cannons and missile tubes. "That's one word for it." Samuel ran his hand along the smooth metal of a torpedo launcher. "I spent 20 years convincing myself that humanity would never need ships like this again. That the future was about trade and exploration and peaceful expansion, and now I'm glad I was wrong." He turned to face her. "The Velthri killed 8,000 people at Sentinel. Station, civilians, families, children. They did it because they thought we couldn't stop them. Rachel's jaw tightened. We're going to prove them wrong. We're going to do more than that. We're going to make sure no one ever thinks about attacking Earth again. The fleet assembled over the following 48 hours. Ships fell into formation with practiced precision, their captains and crews working together as if they had trained for this their entire lives. In a sense, they had. Every simulation, every drill, every late-night study session had been preparing them for exactly this moment. Admiral Warren dressed the fleet via holographic transmission. Her image appeared on bridges and in mess halls across 12,000 ships. 50 years ago, our ancestors looked at the stars and saw danger. They knew that humanity was young, that we were venturing into a galaxy filled with civilizations older and more powerful than our own. They also knew that if we showed our full strength too soon, we would make enemies before we were ready to face them. She paused, letting her words sink in. So they built this fleet in secret. They trained crews in hidden facilities. They waited, and they hoped that the day would never come when we would need to use what they had created. That hope died at Sentinel Station. Her voice hardened. The Velthari believed they could murder our people without consequence. They believed Earth was weak because we chose not to display our weapons. They were wrong. And in 48 hours, we are going to show them exactly how wrong they were. The fleet began its final preparations. Weapons were loaded. Shields were tested. Navigation computers calculated the jump coordinates that would take them to Velthari. Space Samuel Drake stood on the bridge of the Arlington and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, the Velthari were celebrating their easy victory over the human colony. They had no idea what was coming. All ships report ready, Captain, Rachel said. Samuel took a deep breath. Then let's go remind the galaxy why you don't attack Earth. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, 12,000 ships moving as one, heading toward a battle that would change the course of galactic history. The Proxima. The corridor was a stretch of space between two dense nebulae, a natural choke point that controlled access between Velthari territory and the human colonies. For centuries, the Velthari had used it as a staging ground for their conquests, a place where their fleets gathered before striking at weaker civilizations. Fleet. Commander Kethrin had positioned his forces there after the attack on Sentinel Station. 3,000 warships, the pride of the Velthari Third Fleet, hung in formation around a massive space station called the Fist of Empire. He was confident that any human response would be detected long before it arrived, giving him plenty of time to crush it. His sensor officer, a young Velthari named Reth, was monitoring the long-range detection grid when something strange appeared on his screen. Commander Reth said, his voice uncertain, "I'm detecting gravitational anomalies at the edge of the system." Kethrin barely looked up from his tactical display. "Define anomalies." "Displacement signatures, Commander. The kind that indicates ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel." Reth's clawed fingers moved across his console. "I'm reading. Multiple contacts. Many contacts. How many?" Reth's voice cracked. "Thousands, Commander. I'm reading thousands of contacts." The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 12,000 ships materialized across a front, spanning 2 light minutes, their hulls dark against the stars. Dreadnoughts took position at the center, their massive forms bristling with weapons. Cruisers flanked them in precise rows. Carriers hung back, their fighter bays already opening, on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. Kethrin stared at his view screen in disbelief. His intelligence reports had been clear. The humans possessed only 200 military vessels, merchants and explorers, his analysts had called them. Not a threat. "This is impossible," his tactical officer whispered. "Where did they come from?" "It doesn't matter where they came from," Kethrin said, forcing steel into his voice. "They are outnumbered nearly 3-1. All ships, battle formation. Target the largest vessels first." He was wrong about the numbers, but he could not know that. He could not know that human ships were built with triple redundancy in every system, that their weapons could fire faster and hit harder than anything the Velthari possessed, that their crews had spent decades training for exactly this kind of battle. On the bridge of the Arlington, Captain Samuel Drake opened a communication channel on all frequencies. This is Captain Samuel Drake of the Terran Defense Fleet. Addressing the Velthari forces in the Proxima Corridor, your Empire attacked the human colony at Sentinel Station without warning or provocation. You killed 8,000 civilians, including women and children. You believed we could not respond. You let the words hang in the silence of space. We are here to correct that belief. You have 60 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender unconditionally. If you do not comply, we will destroy your fleet. This offer will not be repeated. Kethrin's response came 30 seconds later. Human, you dare threaten the Velthari Empire? Your primitive species will be crushed. All ships, open fire. The Velthari fleet began its attack, thousands of plasma beams and missiles racing toward the human formation. They expected the humans to scatter, to break formation under the overwhelming assault. The humans did not scatter. All ships, defensive pattern Delta, Admiral Warren commanded from the Constitution, absorb the first volley, then respond with everything we have. Human shields, designed by engineers who had studied every known weapon system in the galaxy, held firm against the Velthari barrage. The energy dissipated across overlapping defensive fields, spreading the damage across hundreds of ships instead of concentrating it on a few. Then the humans fired back. The Terran fleet did not fire individual weapons in random patterns. Every ship was connected to a central combat network. It's a system that analyzed the entire battlefield in real time and coordinated every shot for maximum effect. When the humans opened fire, they did so with mathematical precision. Lieutenant Christina Reyes served as weapons officer. Aboard the cruiser Valor, she watched her targeting display with focused intensity as the combat network assigned her ships weapons to specific targets. Firing solution locked, she reported. All batteries ready. Captain Grace Coleman nodded. Fire. The Valor's plasma cannons erupted in a coordinated burst with dozens of other cruisers. Their combined fire struck a single Velthari battleship, overwhelming its shields in seconds. The ship exploded, its reactor breaching in a flash of white light. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated itself over and over. Human ships fired in waves, each wave targeting a specific group of enemy vessels. Velthari shields, designed to withstand the attacks of less sophisticated species, crumbled under the concentrated assault. Kethron watched in horror as his fleet began to disintegrate. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were being torn apart by weapons they could not match and tactics they could not counter. He ordered, "Destroy their admiral, and the fleet will fall." 300 Velthari vessels turned their weapons on the Constitution. It was a desperate gamble, a final attempt to decapitate the human command structure. Admiral Warren did not flinch. All dreadnoughts formed protective formation around the Constitution. Launch fighters to intercept incoming missiles. The dreadnoughts moved with surprising speed for their size, their massive hulls absorbing the Velthari assault. Fighter craft poured from the carriers, thousands of small ships that swarmed the enemy missiles, shot them down before they could reach their target. On the Arlington, Samuel Drake led his ship into the heart of the Velthari formation. The dreadnought's weapons carved through enemy vessels, its shields deflecting return fire with ease. "Captain, we have a group of enemy ships trying to flank the carrier group," Rachel Torres reported. "Take us to intercept." Signal the Defiance and the Republic to follow. Samuel gripped the arms of his command chair. "No one touches our carriers." The three dreadnoughts moved to block the flanking maneuver, their combined firepower creating a wall of destruction that no Velthari ship could penetrate. The enemy vessels tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. For hours after the battle began, it was over. Of the 3,000 Velthari ships that had held the Proxima Corridor, fewer than 200 managed to escape. The rest were destroyed or disabled, their crews dead or captured. The space station, called the Fist of Empire, was a burning wreck. Its weapons silenced forever. Human losses amounted to 47 ships and approximately 3,000 personnel. Every death was mourned, every name recorded, but the victory was complete. Kethron's flagship was among the survivors. fleeing at maximum speed toward Velthry space. He sat in his command chair, staring at nothing, trying to understand what had just happened. His fleet, the pride of the Empire, had been annihilated by a species they had dismissed as primitive. "Commander," his communications officer said quietly, "the human admiral is transmitting a message to our homeworld. She's using our own communication relays. Play it." Admiral Warren's face appeared on the view screen. She looked tired but calm, her gray hair slightly disheveled from hours of battle. "To the High Council of the Velthry Empire. This is Admiral Catherine Warren of the Terran Defense Fleet. Your forces at Proxima Corridor have been defeated. We are not stopping here. We are coming for every military installation, every warship, every weapon platform in your territory. You started this war by murdering our civilians. We will end it by removing your ability to threaten anyone ever again." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was cold. "You should have left Earth alone." The transmission ended. Kethron sat in silence, understanding for the first time that the Velthry Empire had made a terrible mistake, one that could not be undone. The human fleet gathered its wounded and honored its dead. Then, without celebration or delay, it began moving deeper into Velthry space. The Battle of Proxima Corridor was just the beginning. The surviving Velthry commanders sent desperate messages to their homeworld as they fled from Proxima Corridor. They described what they had witnessed: a fleet that should not exist, weapons that should not work, tactics that should not succeed. They begged for reinforcements, for new strategies, for anything that could stop the human advance. The responses they received were dismissive at first. The High Council of the Velthry Empire had ruled for 2,000 years. They had conquered 17 species. They did not believe that a young civilization like humanity could pose a genuine threat. Then, more reports arrived. Human ships had struck a military shipyard in the Tith system. A Velthry patrol fleet had been destroyed near the Corvin Nebula. Communication relay stations were going dark across the outer territories. The dismissiveness turned to concern, and the concern quickly turned to fear. High Counselor Yethmer convened an emergency session of the ruling body in the Great Hall of the Imperial Palace. She was ancient by Velthry standards. Her scales faded to a dull gray, but her mind remained sharp. She had led the Empire through 3 wars of expansion, and she had never known defeat. "How is this possible?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the hall. "Our intelligence indicated 200 ships. Our analysts assured us that humanity was incapable of large-scale military operations. Where did they find 12,000 warships?" Her intelligence minister, a male named Kethler, who had been stripped of his rank insignia in disgrace, could only shake his head. "They hid them, High Counselor. For decades, perhaps longer. They built ships in secret facilities and stored them in hidden locations throughout their system. They trained crews in classified programs. They let us believe they were weak while they prepared for war." Why would they do this? Why would any species invest such resources in weapons they never intended to use? An elderly advisor named Vethra, one of the few members of the council who had studied human history in depth, spoke quietly from his seat. "Because they have done it before, High Counselor. Human history is filled with examples of this strategy. They call it deterrence through hidden strength. They prepare for wars they hope will never come, building weapons they pray will never be fired. Then they are cowards." Yethmar snapped. "High Counselor, they are patient. They are careful. They are survivors." Vethra's amber eyes met hers, and now they are angry. "We killed 8,000 of their people, including children. We thought they would be too weak to respond. We were wrong." The council fell silent. Outside the palace windows, the lights of the capital city stretched to the horizon. A testament to 2 millennia of Velthry civilization. For the first time in living memory, that civilization faced an enemy it could not easily defeat. The human fleet continued its advance. Admiral Warren had divided her forces into 3 task groups, each one striking different sectors of Velthry space simultaneously. They captured military bases and destroyed weapons factories. They disabled orbital defense platforms and seized supply depots. but they did not attack civilians. This was deliberate. Admiral Warren had been clear in her orders from the first day of the campaign: we are not conquerors. We are not destroyers of worlds. We are soldiers who were forced into a war we did not want. We will fight that war with everything we have, but we will not become the monsters our enemy believes we are. On the planet Velthar Minor, a Velthari family huddled in their home as human ships appeared in the sky above their city. They expected fire and death, the same fate that the Velthari military had delivered to countless species over the centuries. Instead, a voice spoke from their communication screen. It was a human woman, her face calm and kind. Citizens of Velthar Minor, this is Commander Lisa Monroe of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are here to neutralize the military installations on your world. We have no quarrel with civilians. Please remain in your homes, and you will not be harmed. This message will repeat. The family watched through their windows as human ships bypassed the residential areas entirely, focusing their weapons on the military base outside the city. When the base was destroyed, human ships departed without firing a single shot at the civilian population. The father of the family, a worker named Teth Valium, turned to his wife with confusion in his eyes. They could have killed us all, he said. Why didn't they? His wife had no answer. Aboard the Arlington, Captain Samuel Drake received a personal message from Earth. His daughter Megan had recorded it from her apartment in Portland. Sitting in the same chair where she had done her homework as a child, Dad, I saw the news. I know you can't tell me where you are or what you're doing, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I'm proud of all of you. She paused, and Samuel could see tears forming in her eyes. Danny Castillo was one of my students. I was a counselor at a summer camp when I was in college, and he was in my group. He was 15, Dad, 15 years old. He liked to draw pictures of spaceships, and he wanted to be an engineer when he grew up. She wiped her eyes. Make them answer for him. Make them answer for all of them. Samuel watched the message 3 times before he could trust himself to respond. When he finally recorded his reply, his voice was steady. I will, sweetheart. I promise. Tell your mother I love her. He closed the communication terminal and returned to the bridge. There was still work to do. The campaign continued for months. Human forces systematically dismantled the Velthari military infrastructure, capturing or destroying everything that could be used to wage war. Shipyards were reduced to rubble. Weapons research facilities were seized and their contents cataloged. Fleet supply stations were emptied of fuel and ammunition. The Velthari attempted counterattacks, but none succeeded. Their tactics, developed over centuries of fighting weaker opponents, were useless against an enemy that adapted to every strategy within hours. Human commanders studied Velthari patterns and exploited their weaknesses with ruthless efficiency. On the planet Corva 3, a Velthari general named Jethkel made a final stand with 10,000 soldiers. He had fortified a mountain stronghold, expecting to hold out for weeks or months against any assault. The humans took the stronghold in 6 hours. They used precision strikes to disable the defensive systems. Then landed ground troops who moved through the tunnels with terrifying speed and coordination. By the time Jethkel realized what was happening, his command center was surrounded. A human soldier, a young woman with sergeant's stripes on her armor, approached him with her weapon lowered. General Jethkel, you are now a prisoner of the Terran Defense Fleet. Your soldiers will be treated according to the laws of war. You will not be harmed if you cooperate. Jethkel stared at her. In his entire career, he had never spared an enemy who surrendered. The concept of mercy in warfare was foreign to Velthari military doctrine. Why? He asked, why do you not kill us? The sergeant's expression did not change. Because we're not you. As the months passed, the Velthari Empire began to crumble. Colonies that had been held by force for centuries saw their oppressors weakened and began to resist. Species that had been conquered generations ago rose up against their masters. The empire that had seemed invincible was falling apart. Admiral Warren watched the reports from her flagship, tracking the progress of her forces across a holographic map of Velthari space. We're approaching the homeworld, Lieutenant Marcus Bell reported. Intelligence suggests the Velthari have pulled all remaining military forces back to defend Velthar Prime. How many ships? Approximately 500. It's all they have left. Catherine nodded slowly. Then we end this. Signal all task groups to converge on Velthor Prime. We're going to finish what they started. The final battle was coming, and this time there would be no escape for the Velthori Empire. 6 months after the attack on Sentinel Station, the Terran fleet entered orbit around Velthor Prime. 12,000 ships formed a ring around the planet, their weapons charged, their shields raised. Below them, a civilization that had conquered 17 species looked up at the sky and understood, finally. What they had awakened, the 500 remaining Velthori warships had formed a defensive line above the planet's capital. But their commanders knew it was hopeless. They had watched their empire crumble, had seen their fleets destroyed, and their military installations reduced to dust. They could fight, but they could not win. High Counselor Yethmar stood at the window of her chamber. Watching the human ships glitter against the stars, she had ruled the empire for 60 years. She had ordered the deaths of millions. She had believed, truly believed, that the Velthori were destined to dominate the galaxy. Now, she was about to surrender to a species she had dismissed as primitives. The human admiral is requesting permission too. Transport to the surface, her aide informed her. She wishes to discuss terms in person. Yethmar closed her eyes. Grant permission. Have the council assemble in the Great Hall. Admiral Catherine Warren materialized in the plaza outside the Imperial Palace with a security detail of 12 soldiers. She was 70 years old, gray-haired and tired from months of war, but she walked with the straight-backed confidence of someone who had earned the right to be exactly where she was. Commander Lisa Monroe led the security detail. She had requested this assignment specifically, and Catherine had granted it without question. Lisa had been the first to see Danny Castillo's final transmission. She deserved to be here at the end, the Velthori guards at the palace. Gates stared at the humans with a mixture of fear and confusion. These small, soft creatures had destroyed their empire. It seemed impossible, and yet here they were. The Great Hall of the Velthori Empire was enormous. A cathedral of dark stone and glowing crystals that had witnessed 2,000 years of imperial power. The council sat in a semicircle of raised seats, their scaled faces unreadable. Yethmar occupied the central throne, her amber eyes fixed on the humans as they entered. "You have one," she said without preamble. "State your terms." Admiral Warren stepped forward. She did not bow or show any sign of submission. She simply stood before the throne and spoke in a voice that carried across the hall. "First, full acknowledgement of your unprovoked aggression against the human colony at Sentinel Station. You will admit publicly and on record you attacked without warning or provocation and that you murdered 8,000 civilians, including children. This acknowledgement will be broadcast to every species in your former territory." Yethmar's claws tightened on the arms of her throne, but she said nothing. "Second, complete dismantlement of your military fleet. You may retain defensive forces equivalent to what you believed Earth possessed before your attack. 200 vessels, no more. All other warships will be destroyed or surrendered to Terran custody." The council members shifted uncomfortably. 200 ships to defend an empire that had once controlled thousands of worlds. It was humiliating. Third, reparations to the families of those killed at Sentinel Station. The specific amounts will be negotiated, but payments will continue for the next 50 years. The money will go directly to the survivors and to memorial funds in the victims' names. Catherine paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the hall. Fourth, establishment of permanent human monitoring stations throughout your territory. These stations will ensure compliance with the terms of surrender and will report any violations directly to Earth. Any attempt to rebuild your military beyond the permitted levels will be met with immediate response. Took another step forward, her eyes meeting Yethmar's. Fifth, the officers who ordered and executed the Sentinel Station attack will stand trial for crimes against humanity. This includes Fleet Commander Catherine and any member of your council who approved the operation. They will be judged by an international tribunal that includes representatives from every species you have conquered. The hall erupted in protest. Council members shouted objections, their amber eyes blazing with outrage. Surrender was one thing, but handing over their own people for trial by inferior species was unacceptable. Yethmar raised her hand and the shouting stopped. "And if we refuse these terms?" she asked quietly. Catherine Warren did not blink. "Then we will do to your civilization what you attempted to do to ours. We will destroy your remaining fleet, remove your government from power, and occupy your worlds until we are satisfied that you no longer pose a threat. Unlike you, we have the strength to accomplish this. And unlike you, we will succeed." The silence that followed was absolute. Yethmar stared at the human woman for a long moment. She thought about her empire, about the generations of Velthri who had built it through conquest and domination. She thought about the species they had enslaved and the worlds they had burned. She had always believed that strength was the only thing that mattered, that the strong had the right to take what they wanted from the weak. Now she understood that she had been wrong. Not because strength did not matter, but because she had misjudged who was truly strong. "You are monsters," she whispered. Catherine shook her head slowly. "No, High Counselor, we are a species that was minding its own business, building colonies and trading goods and exploring the stars when you murdered our children. You created this. You decided that Earth was prey. You thought you could kill 8,000 people and face no consequences." Her voice hardened.
"Oh."
"We are not monsters. We are the consequence of your choices." The treaty was signed that afternoon. Yethmar affixed her seal to the document herself, her claws trembling slightly as she did so. The council watched in silence, their power broken, their empire reduced to a shadow of what it had been. Fleet Commander Kethron was arrested 3 days later, along with 6 members of the council who had approved the Sentinel Station attack. They would stand trial on neutral ground, judged by representatives of a dozen species. The proceedings would be broadcast across the galaxy, a message to every civilization that might consider attacking Earth in the future. On the journey home, Captain Samuel Drake stood at the observation deck of the Arlington and watched the stars drift past. The war was over, but he felt no joy. Too many people had died on both sides. For him to feel anything but exhaustion, Commander Patricia Vance joined him at the window. She had served as his liaison to Admiral Warren throughout the campaign, and they had become friends during the long months of war. "What happens now?" she asked. "We go home. We bury our dead. We rebuild." Samuel paused, his eyes distant. "We try to remember what it was like before all this started. Do you think we can? Go back to normal, I mean?" Samuel thought about Danny Castillo, 15-year-old boy who had died alone and terrified on a space station far from home. He thought about the families who would never see their loved ones again, the children who would grow up without parents, the parents who would grow old without children. "No," he said quietly, "we can't go back. But we can go forward. We can build something better. And if there are others, other empires that try what the Velthri tried?" Samuel smiled, though there was no humor in it. "That's why we built 12,000 ships. That's why we'll build 12,000 more. We'll never be caught unprepared again." Admiral Warren transmitted her final report to Earth as the fleet approached the solar system. She summarized the campaign, the victories and the losses, the terms of surrender, and the plans for occupation. At the end of the report, she added a personal note. "The Velthri believed that humanity was weak because we chose peace. They believed our kindness was a sign of inferiority. They were wrong. We are not weak. We are patient. We do not start wars, but we finish them. We do not seek conquest, but we will not be conquered." She paused, choosing her final words carefully. "To anyone who is listening, to any civilization that might be considering aggression against Earth or her colonies, I have one message. We are not your enemies. We wish to trade with you, to learn from you, to build a future together in peace. But if you attack us, if you threaten our people, if you touch our children, you will discover what the Velthri discovered." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You will discover that humanity does not forget, and humanity does not forgive." The fleet returned home to celebrations and tears. Parades were held in every major city on Earth. Memorials were built for the fallen. Danny Castillo's name was inscribed on a wall of heroes in Geneva. Alongside the names of the 8,000 who had died at Sentinel Station, the galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through centuries of history. Humanity was not a species to be conquered. They were a species that would burn the stars themselves before they allowed their children to die unavenged. Earth would never be caught unprepared again, and anyone who thought about testing that resolve would remember what had happened to the Velthari Empire when they made the mistake of attacking a species that looked weak but was anything. But the stars belonged to everyone who was willing to share them in peace, but they would never belong to those who sought to take them through violence. That was the lesson of Sentinel Station. That was the legacy of the 12,000 ships. That was the promise of humanity to the universe. Touch our people and we will answer. Start a war with Earth, and Earth will end it, always.